Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. It's Natalie here at Sanskrit Blue. So today is day 29 of the 39, 31, 31! The 31 days of tarot. So thank you to Ethony Dawn for putting this together. I think it's so much fun. I felt like I couldn't participate in as many of the prompts as I maybe would have hoped to, but yet it also kind of gave me a needed break during a week when that was necessary. So I'm happy just to participate at all, honestly. And it's a wonderful, wonderful exercise and something for us to do in the community to connect with each other. So top 5 underrated decks, and they're all for completely different reasons. I don't feel like these are in any particular order, except my number 1 is really kind of a number 1 that trumps all of it in that way. But the one I'm going to start with is probably not familiar, unless you've been watching me, and it depends on whether I've even released some of these videos yet, but this is the Orisha Tarot by Andrew McGregor. And it is a deck that is published by Llewellyn, and it is using the tradition, the Orisha traditions of West Africa, and specific as they have become specific to the New World. So, the West Indies and the United States and so on. It's using many of the patakis or religious stories to really illuminate the meanings and give the symbols of the meaning. What am I saying? Lend symbols to illustrate the meanings of the cards, specific from that tradition. And it is absolutely brilliantly done. The artwork itself, and Andrew did all of it, is just so beautiful. I love the way that he worked in the titles of the cards in with, the composition. The 10 of Swords is a slave ship. And this represents the bodies of all the slaves that lie on the bottom of the ocean. To really know and understand the deck, you need the guidebook. You do need the guidebook. And yet, if you read the Pataki, you find that it will absolutely represent, the story. The story will represent a very traditional meaning of the card. So it doesn't go into its own particular system. It does follow, very familiar meanings, but it will tell the same meanings through a different set of symbols and a different tradition and background. And it's beautifully, beautifully done. I mean, look at this guidebook. You get a full color spread for each one of the cards. I don't have the box to hand. I think I put it away, but you get so much information about each one of the cards, and it is designed, both for someone from that tradition who will immediately make a connection, but also for an outsider who has no idea. I'm an outsider. I have no idea. And yet, I found the deck to be incredibly accessible and just unbelievably intelligent and beautiful. So I don't know why more people don't have this deck. I think it must be fear and unfamiliarity. But I'm here to tell you there's nothing to be afraid of, and the familiarity will, if anything, help you understand better and know better, what is actually being worked with, or a little better, of what is being worked with within these religious traditions in a way that's absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, strongly underrated and strongly, strongly recommended. So that's my first one. My second deck well, I'll just go in the order that they are here on my desk. My second deck comes in a little tin, and I keep it in its tin. It is the Tarot de Maria Celia. So I don't see very many people using or working with this deck. And I have it, and even I don't use it and work with it nearly as much as I'd like to. It is the most expressive, beautiful, cheeky, funny, financially affordable. It's US Games, folks. Check it, you know. It's oops, wrong way. It is a US Games deck. It is a very, very reasonably priced. It's, you know, nice size. I did edge it. It didn't come in that color. But it matches the backs. So, yeah, I mean, for a Marseille deck, if you're very unsure about working with the Tarot de Marseille and you don't want to work with something like the Trionfi della Luna that's kind of dark and also very cheeky, but in a completely different way, you know, the Tarot de Maria Celia is really, it's very accessible, you know, and the pips are very pippy, of course, because it's a Marseille deck. But, you know, look how accessible the image is. You can get so much, you know, from just looking at the image, right? You know, you look at it, you've got two that are kind of together and one that's more isolated or maybe protected. But then all three of them are kind of, you know, I mean, there's a lot you can read in just by looking and being willing to see what's there. Look at that Two of Cups. So beautiful. And the faces, oh, the faces. You can't trust, you know you can't trust this little bateleur. He is trouble. Look at that look in his face. Ooh! Okay, I don't think I need to answer that. Sorry. Star Wars Cantina. I turned my ringer back on because of I was away. Anyway, you know, you do have to let go of some of your concepts of what you think about swords when you read with Marseille. But anyway, this isn't about Marseille. It's just the coolness of this deck. I think it's very underrated. I think, you know, TDM readers, like, if you're looking to shake it up, this is a great one to shake it up with. I mean, beautiful. So that is the Tarot de Maria Celia. That is my second deck. I am going to switch my phone to silent so I can finish this video. All right. The third one is a deck that is very near and dear to my heart. And I read with it every now and again. Some of you have seen me reading with it. Handling it, the first thing I want to do is play with it and shuffle with it. It is the New Earth Tarot by Kate Silver and Charlene DeLong. Ooh. And it is a round deck. It kind of has its own, it's got its own spin on the cards, definitely. You know, the meanings of the swords, the meanings of the wands, especially the swords. I noticed the swords and pentacles really take on their own life. Similarly, this does not look like the Nine of Wands we've grown accustomed to. You know, she is taking a different perspective. It is the most wonderful, fresh perspective that I've come across in a very long time. And for that, I appreciate it so deeply. Oops, where did it go? I do appreciate it very, very deeply. Yeah, I think it is a highly underrated deck for all of the brilliance and the beauty. This is Mount Everest, and all of these swords are pointing towards it. You know, it's about spirituality. It's about achieving great heights and taking great risks in order to move towards a more enlightened place. You know, and yet it's got some of the difficulty, the frozenness, you know, of the Ten of Swords. It's just beautiful. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I strongly, strongly recommend it. It is a somewhat, you know, it has some very diverse images in it and imagery that is inclusive. I do feel like it comes from a very specifically white perspective that is kind of, that's approaching. And yet she, a lot of different skin tones and races and traditions are also represented here. It is not just a purely sort of white deck. So yeah, I highly recommend it. It is such a beautiful, beautiful deck, and it deepens with reading over and over. It can deliver a really hard message, and yet, deliver it in a way that it's palatable, where you can really hear it and take in the depth of it, but without it knocking you sideways or terrifying you. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so that's number 3. Number 4, I have to pull out of its little temporary bag. Here's a clue. Those of you who know me well. Okay, that's a clue. That's one of its little stones. And I think it's in here with its oracle deck, with its companion oracle deck it is. So number 4 is the Tarot of the She, which I feel like is a very underrated deck, actually. I have been seeing more and more of it around lately, which is exciting. It is an extremely glossy deck. The cardstock is not the most... It's not my favorite. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I love this deck so much. It just has a completely different perspective on the world. If you like the Marielle and you like the Philarkos Tarot, you will love the Tarot of the She. It is a mass market deck. It's published by Schiffer. And it's interesting to me, like 2 of my favorite decks on the planet came from Schiffer. And I don't know, it's just interesting because a lot of my other favorites are, they're independent decks. This one has a voice that is really unique. It is not an easy deck. It is not an easy deck. It will challenge you a little bit, not just because it's renaming some of the suits and so on, but it puts you in touch. It puts you in touch with some stuff. And it definitely calls the she into your life. If they're not already there, I think those of us who already, have some connection with them will find that, this simply serves to deepen that connection or bring it to the surface. But if you didn't have one to begin with, you will after working with this. It's fascinating. Very different and unusual takes on a very familiar system. The artwork is stunning. It is kind of raw. That moon card. And yet it's rich. I think a friend of mine once described the Philarkos Tarot as being the love child of the Marielle and the Tarot of the She. So, just to give, kind of a frame of reference. So that's my number 4. And my number 4, number 5, number 2, however we're looking at it. Anyway, those are the first 4 decks. My number 1 most underrated deck, and I would say of all time, it's the Thoth. It's the Thoth Tarot. I think people have a tendency to be put off by Aleister Crowley and to write it off. And it is not a deck to be written off. It is absolutely one of the deepest, most remarkable, challenging, perpetually deepen, the kind of deck that you work with, that your understanding of it will deepen and deepen and deepen and deepen. It will continue to unlock things in you over and over and over again in the time that you work with it. And yet, if you're someone who reads and you feel confident picking up most decks and just intuitively reading what you see, and you've got a reasonably foundational understanding of, the Rider-Waite-Smith system, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. They're both coming from the Golden Dawn anyway, right? So there's no, truce, right? For the Four of Swords. That's not that different than what you're dealing with, meaning, on the surface, right? On the surface, you're dealing with a very similar meaning, right? If you're just reading. But if you want to go deep, this will take you deep, deep, deep. So there's just so many layers that have been put in here. Look at all of that sacred geometry. The artwork is spectacular. It has kind of a darkness to it in some aspects that I feel is actually much more to do with the time period during which it was created, which was World War II. There was a lot of darkness happening in that time period. And yet, the art and the artwork of that time period is also just exquisite. It's clearly informed by the artwork that came before it too, in the Art Deco era. So yeah, I think it's highly, highly underrated, and it's worthy of a second look. So if you're somebody who's never, who's stayed away from it for any reason, reconsider, reconsider. It's a really stunning deck. And as I was sitting here looking at it, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't even believe I forgot this one. So I'm breaking the rules because why shouldn't I? And I'm going to throw out a sixth underrated deck because I've been working with this one, not as much as I'd like, but enough to be getting going with it and to be deepening my understanding of the Thoth through this one. Because of understanding more about the Hermetic Kabbalah, and that is the Tarot of the Spirit. So this one is in order because I'm working with it right now, and I need it to be in order. So the Tarot of the Spirit is a Thoth-inspired deck that's taken a little bit in its own direction, but which is also utilizing Hermetic Kabbalah to inform, the keywords and the structure. And it is absolutely the depth. So if you're someone who's curious about it and you find that the Thoth is too much, right? You're not going to trust the Thoth. Like, fuck the Thoth, Crowley, bite me, suck it, all of that, right? Which of course he would have thought was hilarious. He'd say, okay, sure, fine. I recommend in its place, if you can't take Crowley's voice, you will love Pamela Eakins. Don't miss out on the possibilities offered by Hermetic Kabbalah. I'm saying how I ever got to this point in my own path, in my own experience of the tarot, without really diving deeply into Hermetic Kabbalah is beyond me. I don't know. I think the idea of it intimidated me. It brought me too close to Golden Dawn stuff, not realizing how close I was already, all of that. And, guys, at the end of the day, it's just information. It's information. If you're not ready for it, it probably won't sink in deeply enough to cause you any damage anyway. It will simply, look at that dove. It's so beautiful. It will simply open possibilities for understanding yourself, understanding the tarot. It's just exquisite. Yeah. So, yeah, this would be another one to look at. It's just so beautiful. It's so beautiful. All right, so those are my 6 My 6 most underrated decks. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And I will see you again soon in the next one. Bye.